In the quiet space between heartbeats, there is a story unfolding. It is a story that never pauses, never forgets its lines, and never asks for recognition. It is the story of life being sustained not in grand, dramatic gestures, but in the soft rhythm of breath and the steady pulse of blood. It is a choreography that plays out within you every moment. Whether you are awake, asleep, or drifting somewhere in between, this story is carried by two deeply connected systems, the circulatory and the respiratory. They are partners in a continuous conversation, each responding to the other's needs, each adapting to the shifting rhythms of your life. One moves air, the other moves fluid. One brings oxygen into the body, the other delivers that oxygen to every cell. Together, they ensure that life's energy reaches even the smallest and quietest corners of your body. The circulatory system, vast and intricate, is the body's transport network. At its center is the heart, a tireless pump, about the size of a closed fist, beating in a quiet, dependable rhythm. From the heart stretches a branching system of blood vessels, arteries, veins, and tiny capillaries forming pathways that reach every organ and every cell. In this endless loop, blood carries nutrients and oxygen outward and brings carbon dioxide and other wastes back toward the lungs, kidneys, and other points of exit. The respiratory system is the gateway for oxygen, the beginning of the journey. With each breath, air flows inward through your nasal passages, where it is warmed and moistened. It moves past the back of your throat, down the trachea, and into the branching bronchi that lead deep into the lungs. At the very ends of this branching structure are the alveoli, delicate air sacs, with walls so thin that oxygen can slip across into the bloodstream, while carbon dioxide moves out to be exhaled. The beauty of these two systems lies in their unity. Neither can fully serve its purpose without the other. The blood cannot deliver oxygen unless the lungs supply it. The lungs cannot pass oxygen along unless the blood is there to carry it away. This is a loop, an unbroken cycle, a partnership that has been running quietly since the moment of your first breath. That first breath was more than just the drawing in of air. It was the moment these two systems truly began their lifelong collaboration. At birth, as air entered the lungs for the first time, oxygen touched the bloodstream. The heart and lungs began their shared work, and they have continued, without pause, every second since. Even now, as you rest, these systems are listening not in a conscious way, but through countless built-in sensors and reflexes. If the body's oxygen levels fall even slightly, the breathing rhythm adjusts. If carbon dioxide begins to build, the heart may beat a little faster. The lungs may draw in deeper breaths, all without you thinking about it. In moments of stillness, the pace slows, the heart beats gently, and the breath becomes quiet. In moments of movement, the rhythm changes, rising to meet the body's need, then easing again when the demand is over. There is something deeply comforting about this constancy. You could imagine the circulatory system as a network of rivers and streams, always flowing. You could imagine the respiratory system as the breeze that moves through this inner landscape, carrying freshness with every pass. These movements are ancient, older than memory, older even than thought. They are part of the body's most essential design. If you listen closely, perhaps to the sound of your own breathing, or the faint beat of your pulse, you might feel the presence of these systems. The heart's gentle lub-dub, the slow rise and fall of the chest, the invisible movement of blood through the vessels. Each is quiet on its own, but together they create a background rhythm that has been with you since your first moments. In a way, this rhythm is music, not music in the way we hear with our ears, but music felt through every cell. It is the pulse that the rest of the body dances to, whether in the slow sway of rest or the quickened steps of activity. This music changes subtly from moment to moment, yet its essence remains the same: to sustain you. The heart, lungs, blood, and airways do not work in isolation. They are linked to other systems: the digestive system, which supplies nutrients for the blood to carry; the muscular system, which depends on oxygen to move; the skin, which helps in temperature regulation alongside the blood vessels. But the relationship between circulation and respiration is perhaps the most immediate, the most direct. Oxygen enters the lungs, diffuses into the bloodstream, binds to hemoglobin in red blood cells, and is carried to every cell in the body. Those cells use the oxygen in countless chemical reactions that produce the energy needed for life. Carbon dioxide, a natural result of these reactions, moves into the bloodstream, is carried back to the lungs, and is exhaled. The loop closes, only to begin again. This is not a hurried process. Even during physical activity, the exchange remains smooth and efficient. At rest, it is even more graceful. Each breath a slow wave, each heartbeat a quiet push. The body is a master of balance, and these systems are examples of that mastery. Sensors in the brain and blood vessels continuously monitor oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, adjusting the depth and rate of breathing. The heart responds to these changes, ensuring that each cell receives just what it needs. This fine-tuned cooperation happens without conscious effort, allowing the mind to wander, to rest, to dream. As you prepare to drift deeper into this lecture, it can be calming to imagine your circulatory and respiratory systems as a landscape, perhaps a wide, gentle river under an open sky. The river carries the life-giving water, the blood, through every part of the land. Above, the air is clear and steady, each breeze bringing fresh oxygen, each exhalation carrying away what is no longer needed. Together, the river and the wind keep the land alive, balanced, and at peace. In the stillness of this moment, your own inner river flows quietly. Your own inner wind moves gently. They do not need your attention to continue, but noticing them can bring a sense of gratitude, a sense of connection to the quiet work that sustains you. This will be our starting point for the journey ahead, a journey that will explore the structure and function of these two remarkable systems in greater detail. We will see how the heart moves the blood, how the lungs move the air, and how the two systems exchange their gifts with one another. But for now, we rest in the awareness that they are working together, as they always have, as they always will, to keep life flowing within you. 2. The body's transport and air systems. If we step back for a moment, away from the individual details of muscles and valves, of alveoli and hemoglobin, we begin to see the circulatory and respiratory systems as two halves of a single whole, a living exchange network designed to keep the body nourished and balanced. One is the body's transport system, the other is the body's air system. Together, they are an ongoing conversation between movement and stillness, between the flow of fluid and the drift of air. The circulatory system is the more tangible of the two. It is made up of the heart, the blood, and a vast network of blood vessels that reach into every part of you. The heart serves as the central pump, sending blood out through the arteries, slowing and spreading through the capillaries, and returning through the veins. This blood is not simply a passive fluid, it is a carrier, a traveler, laden with oxygen from the lungs, nutrients from the digestive system, and countless other chemical messages that keep the body in balance. The respiratory system, by contrast, is the portal between you and the world beyond your skin. With every breath, it draws in air, a mixture of gases, of which oxygen is the most vital for sustaining life. That oxygen does not remain in the lungs for long. Within seconds, it is moving across the delicate walls of the alveoli into the blood, where it binds to hemoglobin and is carried away to the tissues that need it most. It is tempting to think of these two systems as separate routes, one carrying a fluid within, the other moving a gas between the body and its environment. But in reality, they are two interlaced parts of the same journey. The blood's voyage is incomplete without the air's contribution, and the air's usefulness is fleeting unless it finds its way into the circulation. The meeting point between these two networks is a place of delicate efficiency. The pulmonary capillaries that embrace each alveolus like a fine net. Here, in these microscopic spaces, the exchange is constant, oxygen slipping into the blood, carbon dioxide leaving it. This process is guided entirely by natural gradients, the difference in concentration of gases between the air and the blood. No conscious control is required. The molecules move because the conditions allow them to. When you inhale, the diaphragm contracts and moves downward, creating a gentle vacuum that draws air into the lungs. At the same time, the heart may subtly adjust its rhythm, ready to send newly oxygenated blood onward. When you exhale, the diaphragm relaxes, the air leaves, and carbon dioxide is carried away. The circulatory system then begins another loop, delivering oxygen to tissues and returning carbon dioxide to the lungs. This looping exchange happens whether you are lying still in bed, strolling through a quiet garden, or engaged in more active movement. It adjusts in pace and depth without you ever having to think about it. In moments of rest, the breaths are slower, the heart beats more gently, and the exchange is calm. In moments of effort, the lungs and heart increase their tempo together, moving more air and more blood to meet the body's needs. In many ways, these two systems can be thought of as a river and the wind. The river carries life-sustaining water to every part of the land, while the wind brings freshness, stirring the surface and keeping the waters healthy. In the body, the river is the circulation of blood. The wind is the movement of breath. Without the river, the wind has nowhere to bring its gift. Without the wind, the river carries nothing new to give. From a broader perspective, this exchange is part of an even larger cycle, one that links your body to the entire living world. The oxygen you breathe comes from plants and photosynthetic organisms, from forests and oceans far away. The carbon dioxide you exhale becomes part of the air that plants will use in turn. In this way, your own circulatory and respiratory systems are participants in the Earth's wider rhythm, as much a part of the planet's balance as the tides or the seasons. As we continue deeper into this lecture, we will move from this broad view to a closer look, first at the architecture of the circulatory system, then the structure of the respiratory system, and then at the moments where they meet. But it is worth carrying forward the image of them as partners, never apart, always in conversation, keeping the body nourished with each quiet heartbeat and each unhurried breath. For now, you might notice your own rhythm, the gentle expansion of the lungs, the slight pulse of blood in your temples or wrists. You might imagine that each breath is a gift to the blood, and each beat of the heart is a gift to the breath. Two systems, one purpose, to sustain life in the most graceful way possible. 3. The circulatory system's architecture. If we imagine the body as a living landscape, the circulatory system is its network of rivers, streams, and hidden channels, a flowing design that reaches every part of the terrain. It is not a single straight path, but an intricate arrangement of loops, branches, and returns, all connected to a central source, the heart. At the most visible level, the circulatory system can be thought of in three main components: the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood itself. Each plays a distinct role, but none can function without the others. The heart is the pump, the vessels are the pathways, and the blood is the life-giving cargo. Together, they create a complete and closed loop, allowing the same volume of blood to circle the body again and again, gathering and delivering what is needed. The heart rests in the chest cavity, slightly left of center, nestled between the lungs and protected by the rib cage. Though about the size of a closed fist, it is remarkably strong, beating on average over 100 times per day. This steady rhythm sends blood through two main circuits: the pulmonary circulation, which carries blood to and from the lungs, and the systemic circulation, which moves blood to the rest of the body. From the heart, freshly oxygenated blood enters the arteries' vessels with strong, elastic walls designed to withstand the pressure of each heartbeat. Arteries branch into smaller arterioles, which in turn lead to capillaries. These capillaries are the smallest blood vessels, so narrow that red blood cells pass through in single file. It is here, in the capillary beds, that exchanges take place. Oxygen and nutrients leave the blood, while carbon dioxide and other wastes enter it. Once these exchanges are complete, the blood begins its return journey through venules, which merge into larger veins. Unlike arteries, veins work under lower pressure, aided by one-way valves that keep blood flowing toward the heart. In the limbs, muscle contractions help push the blood upward, a subtle cooperation between the circulatory and muscular systems. The arrangement of this network is not random, it follows a carefully balanced plan. The arteries and veins often run side by side, like parallel roads. In certain areas, blood vessels take winding paths, creating a reserve of length that allows for movement without stretching or damage. In others, vessels branch and rejoin, creating multiple routes for blood to reach its destination. One of the most remarkable features of the circulatory system is its constancy. Regardless of whether you are resting or active, blood must reach every cell. The flow may be adjusted, directed more to the muscles during exercise, more to the digestive system after a meal, but no part of the body is ever left unattended. Even at rest, the brain and heart themselves receive a steady share of blood, ensuring that the body's control centers are never without oxygen and nutrients. The blood's journey is both vast and immediate. In a single day, your heart pumps roughly 500 liters of blood. This means that each cell in your body is visited many times over in the span of hours, receiving fresh supplies and giving back what it no longer needs. The same drop of blood may circle the body thousands of times in a single day, yet the cycle remains smooth and uninterrupted. Supporting this network is a vast network of connective tissues and membranes. The blood vessels are lined with a smooth inner layer called the endothelium, which reduces friction and allows blood to flow easily. Surrounding this are layers of muscle and connective tissue, giving the vessels both strength and flexibility. In the largest arteries, these walls are thick and resilient, able to stretch slightly with each surge of blood, then return to their original shape. Within the chest cavity, the heart is anchored by the pericardium, a double-layered sac that cushions and protects it. This sac contains a small amount of fluid, allowing the heart to move and beat without friction. The position of the heart, between the lungs and above the diaphragm, places it in the perfect location to work in harmony with the respiratory system. As intricate as this design is, it is also adaptable. Blood vessels can constrict or widen to control blood flow and pressure. Over time, new vessels can form to bypass blockages or to supply growing tissues. The circulatory system is not static, it responds to the body's needs, reshaping itself in small ways over a lifetime. In this way, the architecture of the circulatory system is both precise and flexible. It is a system built for constant use, for endurance, for the gentle but unceasing task of delivering life's essentials, whether carrying oxygen from the lungs, nutrients from the digestive tract, or messages in the form of hormones. The circulatory system ensures that no part of the body is ever truly far away from the whole. As we move forward in this lecture, we will step closer to the heart itself, the central engine of this inner river, and see how its structure, rhythm, and valves keep the flow moving without pause, day after day, year after year. 4. The heart's form and function. The heart is the central engine of the circulatory system, a muscular organ that works without rest from the first moments of life until the very last. Though it weighs less than a pound, it moves an astonishing volume of blood each day, keeping the body's cells supplied and balanced. Its location is carefully chosen, nestled in the center of the chest, tilted slightly to the left, shielded by the rib cage, and cushioned by the lungs on either side. The heart's outer structure is shaped like a cone, with its base at the top and its pointed apex angled downward toward the left hip. Inside, it is divided into 4 hollow chambers, each with a role to play in the continuous flow of blood. The upper chambers, called the atria, are the receiving rooms. The lower chambers, the ventricles, are the pumping stations. The right side of the heart deals with oxygen-poor blood returning from the body, while the left side handles oxygen-rich blood coming back from the lungs. The right atrium receives blood from 2 large veins, the superior and inferior vena cava, which gather the blood from the upper and lower parts of the body. From here, the blood moves through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. This valve, like all valves in the heart, works as a one-way gate, allowing flow in only one direction and preventing any backward movement. When the right ventricle contracts, it pushes blood through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary arteries, which carry it to the lungs. In the lungs, the blood releases carbon dioxide and picks up oxygen before returning through the pulmonary veins to the left atrium. The left atrium, in turn, sends this oxygen-rich blood through the mitral valve into the left ventricle, the most muscular and powerful of the 4 chambers. The left ventricle pumps blood out through the aortic valve into the aorta, the largest artery in the body, from which it branches to serve every organ and tissue. The walls of the ventricles are made of specialized cardiac muscle, known as myocardium. This muscle is unique in that it contracts rhythmically on its own, yet can be influenced by signals from the nervous system to speed up or slow down. The left ventricle's wall is much thicker than that of the right, as it must generate enough force to send blood throughout the entire body, not just to the nearby lungs. Valves are crucial to the heart's smooth function. The tricuspid, pulmonary, mitral, and aortic valves open and close in a precise sequence, creating the familiar lub-dub sound of the heartbeat. The lub comes from the closing of the tricuspid and mitral valves as the ventricles begin to contract, while the dub comes from the closing of the pulmonary and aortic valves as the ventricles relax. The heart's rhythm is maintained by an internal electrical system, beginning with the sinoatrial node in the right atrium. This small cluster of specialized cells generates electrical impulses that spread through the atria, causing them to contract. The signal then travels to the atrioventricular AV node, where it pauses briefly before continuing through the bundle of His and into the Purkinje fibers, triggering the ventricles to contract. This coordinated electrical activity ensures that the heart's chambers work in harmony, each filling and emptying at just the right moment. Despite its ceaseless activity, the heart is well supplied with its own blood vessels, the coronary arteries, which branch off from the base of the aorta and wrap around the heart's surface. These arteries deliver oxygen and nutrients directly to the cardiac muscle, ensuring it has the energy it needs to keep pumping. The heart structure is a perfect example of form meeting function. Its chambers are shaped to collect and propel blood efficiently. Its valves ensure a smooth, one-way flow. Its muscle walls are strong yet flexible, able to sustain a lifetime of work, and its electrical system keeps time without fail, adjusting to the needs of the moment, whether in the calm of rest or the surge of activity. 5. The language of the heartbeat. The sound of the heartbeat is one of the first rhythms we encounter in life. Long before birth, it is there steady, reassuring, and constant, setting the pace for growth and development. To an unborn child, this rhythm is a background presence, something felt as much as heard, a companion in the quiet warmth of the womb. For all of us, it remains a companion throughout life, even when we are not aware of it. This rhythm is not random. It follows a carefully timed sequence known as the cardiac cycle, a repeating pattern of contraction and relaxation that allows the heart to fill with blood and then send it on its way. It is a cycle so reliable that it repeats itself over and over, tens of thousands of times each day, without faltering in healthy conditions. The cardiac cycle is divided into two main phases, systole and diastole. During systole, the ventricles, the heart's lower chambers, contract. This action pushes blood out into the arteries, sending oxygen-rich blood from the left ventricle into the aorta and onward to the body, while the right ventricle sends oxygen-poor blood toward the lungs through the pulmonary arteries. Systole is the active, forceful part of the heartbeat, the moment when the heart's muscular walls work hardest. Diastole is the quieter phase. During diastole, the ventricles relax. The heart's chambers open to receive blood returning from the lungs and the body. This resting phase is no less important than systole. It allows the heart to refill, to prepare for the next contraction, and to maintain a steady supply of blood ready for circulation. Without adequate diastole, the heart would not have time to replenish its own supply of blood, nor would it pump efficiently to the rest of the body. The familiar lub-dub sound often associated with the heartbeat comes from the precise closing of the heart's valves. The first sound, the lub, occurs at the start of systole when the tricuspid and mitral valves close. These valves separate the atria from the ventricles, and their closure prevents blood from flowing backward into the atria when the ventricles contract. The second sound, the dub, marks the beginning of diastole as the pulmonary and aortic valves close, preventing blood from returning into the ventricles after it has been pumped into the arteries. These two sounds form a pattern that is instantly recognizable to the trained ear and often even to the untrained. Doctors and nurses listen for the quality, timing, and clarity of these sounds because they reveal much about the heart's health. A clean, crisp closure suggests valves in good condition. Extra sounds, called murmurs, can hint at turbulence in blood flow or subtle changes in the heart's structure. Although the heart's rhythm is generated internally by its own electrical conduction system, it is not fixed or mechanical in the way a machine might be. The pace can shift from moment to moment, influenced by the body's needs and guided by the nervous system. At rest, the parasympathetic nervous system encourages a slower, more relaxed heartbeat, conserving energy and maintaining calm. During activity or in times of stress, the sympathetic nervous system increases both the rate and the force of the heart's contractions, ensuring that blood and the oxygen it carries reaches the muscles more quickly. In a healthy adult at rest, the heart typically beats between 60 and 100 times per minute, though this is not a rigid rule. Trained athletes, whose hearts are conditioned to pump more efficiently, often have resting rates as low as 40 beats per minute. This lower rate is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. Each beat moves a larger volume of blood, so fewer beats are required to meet the body's needs. Another subtle feature of the heartbeat is heart rate variability, the natural fluctuation in the time between one beat and the next. Even in a state of rest, the interval from beat to beat is not perfectly uniform. It shifts slightly with breathing. Inhalation tends to speed the heart up. Exhalation slows it down. This variability is not a flaw. In fact, it is a sign of adaptability. A heart that can respond flexibly to the body's demands, adjusting with each breath, is better equipped to maintain balance under changing conditions. The heartbeat also speaks in another language, that of blood pressure. This measure reflects the force of blood against the walls of the arteries during the two phases of the cardiac cycle. The higher number in a blood pressure reading, called systolic pressure, records the force during ventricular contraction. The lower number, diastolic pressure, reflects the pressure during relaxation when the heart is filling with blood. Together, these numbers offer a glimpse into how well the heart and arteries are functioning as a team. During times of calm, such as now, the heartbeat often slows and deepens. Each contraction is deliberate, and each relaxation is complete. The ventricles fill fully with blood before sending it onward. The valves open and close without hurry, and the cycle repeats in an unbroken pattern. This is the heartbeat at rest, quiet, steady, and entirely sufficient for the body's needs. When we engage in physical effort, the heartbeat adjusts almost instantly. Systole becomes more forceful, diastole shorter but still present, the entire cycle quickening to match the demands of the moment. Even then, the basic pattern remains: contraction and relaxation, valves opening and closing, the sequence preserved in perfect order. To listen to the heart, whether with a stethoscope or simply by feeling the pulse at the wrist, is to read the story of the body in real time. A rapid rhythm may speak of activity, excitement, or a temporary strain. A slower rhythm may tell of deep rest or trained efficiency. Changes in the strength or quality of the beat may reveal the influence of hydration, temperature, emotional state, or even the gentle pull of gravity on the body's fluids. The pulse is the outward echo of the heartbeat. Each surge of blood through the arteries after a ventricular contraction sends a wave along the vessel walls. This wave can be felt most easily where an artery passes close to the skin over a firm surface at the wrist, the neck, the inside of the elbow, the top of the foot. By feeling the pulse, you can count the heart rate, but you can also notice its rhythm, strength, and regularity. The language of the heartbeat is therefore not just one of sound, but of movement, timing, and adaptability. It is a conversation between the heart, the vessels, the lungs, and the rest of the body, a conversation that never stops, yet never demands our conscious attention unless we choose to listen. In moments of stillness, the heartbeat can be a gentle reminder of continuity. It connects the present moment to all the moments that have come before, each one carried forward by the same cycle of systole and diastole. It is a rhythm that was present on your first day, and without you having to ask it, will be there on your last. As we move into the next part of our lecture, we will follow the path of the blood beyond the heart into the branching vessels that carry it forward and bring it home again, the arteries, veins, and capillaries that make up the body's vast transportation network. 6. Blood vessels, arteries, veins, and capillaries. The circulatory system is often imagined as a single river flowing through the body, but in reality, it is more like an intricate network of waterways, some wide and swift, others narrow and slow, all connected in a continuous loop. This network is made of 3 main types of blood vessels: arteries, veins, and capillaries. Each has its own structure, its own role, and its own place in the journey of the blood. Arteries are the outgoing pathways, carrying blood away from the heart. In the systemic circulation, they carry oxygen-rich blood to the body's tissues. In the pulmonary circulation, they carry oxygen-poor blood toward the lungs. Because they receive blood directly from the powerful contractions of the heart, arteries are built to handle high pressure. Their walls are thick and elastic, with 3 layers: the inner endothelium, which is smooth to allow easy flow, a middle layer of muscle and elastic tissue, which lets the artery stretch and recoil with each heartbeat, and an outer layer of connective tissue, which provides strength and flexibility. The largest artery in the body is the aorta, which rises from the left ventricle of the heart and curves in a gentle arch before descending through the chest and abdomen. From the aorta, smaller arteries branch outward like the limbs of a great tree, carrying blood to the head, arms, torso, and legs. These arteries branch further into smaller arterioles, which help regulate blood flow by constricting or dilating in response to the body's needs. Eventually, the arterioles lead to the smallest vessels of all the capillaries. Capillaries are so narrow that red blood cells must pass through them in single file. Their walls are only 1 cell thick, allowing for the easy exchange of gases, nutrients, and wastes between the blood and the surrounding tissues. In the lungs, oxygen moves from the air in the alveoli into the blood in the capillaries, while carbon dioxide moves from the blood into the alveoli to be exhaled. In the body's tissues, the process is reversed. Oxygen and nutrients leave the blood, and carbon dioxide and other wastes enter it. This exchange happens not in isolation, but in countless locations at once. Every cell in the body is within reach of a capillary, ensuring that no part of the body is too far from the supplies it needs. The layout of these tiny vessels is dense in active tissues like muscles and glands, and more sparse in areas that require less constant attention. After the exchanges in the capillaries, the blood begins its return journey through small vessels called venules. These merge into larger veins, which carry the blood back toward the heart. Veins are built differently from arteries. Because the blood pressure is much lower on the return trip, their walls are thinner and less muscular. Many veins, especially in the arms and legs, contain one-way valves that prevent blood from flowing backward. These valves are particularly important in helping blood move upward against gravity, working together with the gentle squeezing action of surrounding muscles when the body moves. The largest veins in the body are the superior and inferior vena cava. The superior vena cava returns blood from the head, neck, and upper limbs, while the inferior vena cava returns blood from the lower body. Both empty into the right atrium of the heart, completing the circuit. Though arteries, veins, and capillaries differ in structure and function, they are united in purpose. Together, they form a closed loop that moves blood continuously, adapting to the body's changing needs. During rest, certain vessels may narrow to reduce flow to less active areas, conserving energy and maintaining balance. During activity, vessels supplying the muscles widen, allowing more blood and therefore more oxygen to reach them. The health of the blood vessels is essential to the health of the circulatory system as a whole. Their elasticity, smoothness, and ability to respond to signals from the body all contribute to efficient circulation. Over time, the vessels naturally adjust to patterns of use, reinforcing their structure where it is most needed, and sometimes creating new pathways when others are blocked or damaged. When thought of as a whole, this network is astonishing in its reach. If all the blood vessels in the human body were laid end to end, they would stretch for tens of thousands of miles, long enough to wrap around the earth more than once. Yet all of this is contained within the boundaries of the body. serving every cell, every moment. In the next section, we will turn our attention inward to the fluid that travels through this network, the blood itself. We will see how its components work together to carry oxygen, fight infection, and maintain balance, each performing its role with quiet precision. 7. The composition of blood. Blood is the quiet traveler within the circulatory system, flowing through its intricate network of vessels every moment of life. It is more than just a red liquid. It is a living tissue, carrying oxygen, nutrients, hormones, and chemical messages while also removing waste products that the body no longer needs. Every drop is made of multiple components, each with its own purpose, yet all working together in harmony. The majority of blood's volume is a pale, straw-colored fluid called plasma. This fluid is mostly water, but it also contains dissolved proteins, minerals, sugars, and waste products. Plasma serves as the transport medium for almost everything that moves through the blood, carrying nutrients from the digestive system to the cells, transporting hormones from glands to their target tissues, and delivering waste products to the kidneys, liver, or lungs for removal. The water content of plasma helps maintain the body's fluid balance, while the proteins it carries perform roles as varied as blood clotting, immune defense, and maintaining the proper pressure within the vessels. Suspended in this plasma are the blood's cellular elements. The most numerous are the red blood cells, or erythrocytes, which give blood its characteristic color. These cells are shaped like small, flexible discs, allowing them to move easily through even the narrowest capillaries. Their primary job is to carry oxygen from the lungs to the body's tissues and to return carbon dioxide from the tissues back to the lungs. This task is made possible by a protein called hemoglobin, which binds oxygen in the lungs and releases it where it is needed in the body. Hemoglobin also binds some of the carbon dioxide produced by cells, helping to carry it back to the lungs for exhalation. Red blood cells are produced in the bone marrow, live for about 120 days, and are then broken down, with many of their components recycled to make new cells. Less numerous, but equally important, are the white blood cells, or leukocytes. These are the guardians of the body, patrolling the bloodstream and tissues to defend against bacteria, viruses, and other foreign invaders. Unlike red blood cells, white cells are part of the immune system, and there are several different types, each with a specialized role. Some white cells engulf and digest harmful microbes. Others produce antibodies to target specific threats, and still others coordinate the immune response by releasing signaling molecules. Although they make up only a small fraction of the blood's volume, white blood cells are essential to maintaining health, and their numbers can increase rapidly during infection or inflammation. Also found in the blood are platelets, or thrombocytes, which are small, disc-shaped fragments that play a critical role in clotting. When a blood vessel is damaged, platelets quickly gather at the site, sticking to the vessel wall and to each other. They release chemicals that activate clotting factors in the plasma, leading to the formation of a stable clot that seals the break and prevents further blood loss. This clotting process is tightly controlled so that clots form only where they are needed and dissolve once the vessel has healed. The constant movement of blood ensures that every cell in the body remains in contact with these essential components. Oxygen-rich red blood cells travel from the lungs to the tissues, where they release their oxygen and collect carbon dioxide. White blood cells move in and out of the circulation, monitoring for signs of infection or injury. Platelets remain alert for any sign of vessel damage, ready to start the clotting process within seconds. Plasma carries not only nutrients but also the byproducts of cellular activity, ensuring that waste is removed efficiently. Blood's composition is not fixed. It changes in subtle ways throughout the day, and in response to the body's needs. After eating, plasma carries a greater concentration of nutrients. During exercise, red blood cells deliver oxygen more quickly, and the plasma carries away increased amounts of carbon dioxide and heat. During illness, white blood cell counts can rise dramatically, and plasma can carry higher levels of antibodies. Even changes in posture or temperature can influence how blood is distributed within the body and how its components are used. The volume of blood in the human body depends on size and weight, but in an average adult, it is about 5 liters. Despite this relatively small volume, blood is in constant motion, completing the full circuit of the body in less than a minute at rest. This rapid circulation means that oxygen and nutrients are never far from any cell, and waste products are removed before they can build up. The production of blood's components is a continuous process. In the bone marrow, stem cells give rise to new red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. The balance between production and breakdown is carefully maintained, so that the number of each type of cell stays within a healthy range. If more cells are needed, for example, to replace blood lost from injury or to fight an infection, the bone marrow can increase its activity, even as it flows quietly through the vessels. Blood is a dynamic, ever-changing fluid. It responds to the body's shifting conditions, delivering what is needed, removing what is not, and maintaining balance between the countless processes that sustain life. Its movement is powered by the heart, guided by the vessels, and shaped by its own internal composition: plasma, red cells, white cells, and platelets, each essential in its own way. In the stillness of rest, blood continues its journey, moving slowly through the veins and arteries, exchanging gases in the lungs, delivering oxygen to tissues, and returning to the heart for another cycle. It does not pause, because the body's needs never truly stop. Every moment, every heartbeat, every breath is supported by this continuous movement, this quiet, vital flow. In the next part of our lecture, we will bring together the heart, the vessels, and the blood into a single picture, following the complete path of circulation from start to finish, and seeing how the pulmonary and systemic loops work together to keep the body in perfect balance. 8. The journey of blood through the body. The movement of blood through the body is one of the most constant and essential processes of life. It is not hurried, yet it is never still. From the moment the heart first begins to beat, blood begins a journey that will continue without pause for as long as life lasts. This journey follows a precise route, looping again and again through 2 main circuits: the pulmonary circulation, which carries blood between the heart and lungs, and the systemic circulation, which carries blood between the heart and the rest of the body. These 2 loops are connected, each beginning where the other ends, forming an unbroken cycle of movement and exchange. It begins in the right atrium of the heart, where oxygen-poor blood from the body returns through the superior and inferior vena cava. This blood has already given up much of its oxygen to the tissues and has collected carbon dioxide and other wastes in return. From the right atrium, the blood passes through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. When the ventricle contracts, the blood is pushed through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary arteries, which carry it toward the lungs. In the lungs, the pulmonary arteries branch into smaller vessels, eventually leading to networks of capillaries that surround the alveoli, tiny air sacs, where gas exchange takes place. Here, oxygen from the air inside the alveoli diffuses into the blood, binding to hemoglobin in red blood cells. At the same time, carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood into the alveoli, ready to be exhaled. This exchange happens in silence, guided by simple physical principles. yet it is the foundation for everything else the blood will do on its journey. Once it has received its supply of oxygen, the blood is now bright red and ready to begin the next stage of its route. It flows from the lungs into the pulmonary veins, which carry it back to the heart, but this time to the left atrium. From the left atrium, the blood passes through the mitral valve into the left ventricle, the most powerful chamber of the heart. When the left ventricle contracts, it sends blood through the aortic valve into the aorta, beginning its passage through the systemic circulation. From the aorta, blood travels into major arteries that branch repeatedly, carrying it to every region of the body. These arteries divide into arterioles and finally into capillaries, where the blood comes into close contact with the body's tissues. Here, the oxygen bound to hemoglobin is released, moving into the surrounding cells where it will be used to produce energy. At the same time, carbon dioxide and other waste products produced by the cells move into the blood to be carried away for removal. The movement through capillaries is slow compared to the speed of blood in the larger vessels. This slower pace allows enough time for the exchanges to take place. Oxygen and nutrients moving out, carbon dioxide and wastes moving in. The blood's composition is subtly changed with each passage through these networks, reflecting the needs and activities of the tissues it serves. Once these exchanges are complete, the blood begins its return to the heart. It flows from the capillaries into small venules, which merge into larger veins. In the legs and lower body, the blood must travel upward against gravity to reach the heart, aided by one-way valves in the veins and the gentle squeezing action of surrounding muscles during movement. From the upper body, blood drains into the superior vena cava. From the lower body, it enters the inferior vena cava, both empty into the right atrium, where the cycle begins again. This continuous journey is perfectly timed to meet the body's needs. At rest, the entire circuit can take less than a minute to complete. During physical activity, the heart beats faster and more forcefully. The vessels adjust their diameter, and blood moves more quickly to deliver oxygen and remove wastes at a higher rate. Even in moments of deep rest, when the heart beats more slowly, the circulation never stops. The tissues always require a steady supply of oxygen and nutrients. One of the remarkable aspects of this journey is its adaptability. Blood can be directed to where it is needed most. During exercise, more flows to the muscles. After eating, more flows to the digestive system. In hot weather, more flows to the skin to release heat. These shifts happen automatically, guided by signals from the nervous system and chemical messengers in the blood itself. The pulmonary and systemic loops depend entirely on one another. The systemic loop cannot function without the oxygen provided in the lungs, and the pulmonary loop cannot function without the steady flow of blood returning from the body. Together, they form a single cycle, the heartbeat serving as the link that keeps them in perfect rhythm. This journey is not something we consciously control, yet it shapes every moment of life. Every movement, every breath, every thought is supported by the quiet, constant work of circulation. The route never changes in its essential pattern: heart to lungs, lungs to heart, heart to body, body back to heart. Yet every cycle is subtly different, reflecting the needs of the moment. As we continue, we will turn our attention to the respiratory system in more detail, following the path of air from the outside world into the lungs, and seeing how its structure supports the exchange of gases that makes the journey of blood possible. 9. The path of air into the body. The respiratory system begins its work the moment air first enters the body. This journey, like the circulation of blood, is constant and unbroken, taking place without our conscious command. With every breath, air travels a defined path, moving through a series of passages that filter, warm, and moisten it before it reaches the delicate tissues of the lungs. Each part of this path is shaped to protect the body while ensuring that oxygen can pass easily into the bloodstream and carbon dioxide can be carried away. The journey of air begins at either the nose or the mouth. The nose is the primary entrance, and it is uniquely suited to prepare air for the lungs. The nasal cavity is lined with tiny hairs called cilia and a thin layer of mucus. Together, they act as the first line of defense, trapping dust, pollen, and other particles before they can travel deeper into the body. The air is also warmed as it passes over the rich network of blood vessels in the nasal lining, bringing it closer to body temperature and moistened to protect the delicate tissues further along the respiratory tract. The mouth can also serve as an entry point, especially during heavy breathing, but it does less to filter and condition the air. From the nasal cavity, air passes into the pharynx, a shared passageway for both food and air. The pharynx leads to the larynx, or voice box, which sits at the top of the trachea. The larynx not only houses the vocal cords, but also plays a role in protecting the lower airways. When swallowing, a small flap of tissue called the epiglottis folds over the opening of the larynx, ensuring that food and liquid pass into the esophagus rather than the trachea. Below the larynx, the trachea, or windpipe, begins its descent toward the lungs. The trachea is supported by C-shaped rings of cartilage, which keep it open at all times while still allowing flexibility. Its lining contains cilia and mucus-producing cells that continue the work of filtering the air, moving trapped particles upward toward the throat, where they can be swallowed or expelled. At the lower end of the trachea, the pathway divides into the right and left bronchi, each leading to one lung. Like branches of a tree, these bronchi divide again and again into smaller and smaller tubes, called bronchioles, which spread throughout the lungs. The walls of these passages are smooth and flexible, able to widen or narrow in response to the body's needs, directing airflow to different regions of the lungs. The bronchioles eventually end in tiny clusters of air sacs called alveoli. These are the true sites of gas exchange, where oxygen passes into the blood and carbon dioxide leaves it. Each alveolus is surrounded by a fine network of capillaries, and its thin walls allow gases to diffuse easily in and out. The vast number of alveoli in the lungs, hundreds of millions, creates a huge surface area for exchange, roughly the size of a tennis court when spread out flat. This large area, combined with the thinness of the alveolar walls, allows the lungs to move oxygen into the blood and remove carbon dioxide with remarkable efficiency. The movement of air through this pathway is driven by the action of the diaphragm and other breathing muscles. When the diaphragm contracts, it moves downward, expanding the space in the chest cavity and drawing air in. When it relaxes, the space in the chest decreases, and air is gently pushed out. This simple cycle of inhalation and exhalation repeats without pause, adjusting in depth and speed to match the body's demands. Along its path, the air is not only transported but also constantly monitored. Specialized cells in the nasal passages can detect harmful substances and trigger sneezing to expel them. Receptors in the trachea and bronchi can sense irritants and produce coughing to clear the airways. Even the temperature and humidity of the air are adjusted along the way, protecting the fragile alveoli from sudden changes. The journey of air into the body is, in many ways, a mirror to the journey of blood through the body. Both follow defined routes, both adapt to the body's needs, and both ultimately serve the same purpose: to bring oxygen to the tissues and remove carbon dioxide. The respiratory path ensures that the air arriving in the lungs is as clean, warm, and moist as possible, ready for the vital exchange that takes place in the alveoli. In the next part, we will explore that exchange more closely, looking at how oxygen moves from the air into the blood, how carbon dioxide takes its place in the air, and how these movements are perfectly balanced to sustain life with each breath. 10. The exchange of gases in the lungs. The lungs are not just hollow spaces that fill and empty with each breath. They are delicate, living structures where one of life's most essential exchanges takes place. Here, at the meeting point of the respiratory and circulatory systems, oxygen passes from the air into the blood, and carbon dioxide moves from the blood into the air. This process is quiet, invisible, and effortless to the person experiencing it, yet it is as vital as the beating of the heart itself. The exchange begins in the alveoli, the tiny air sacs at the ends of the smallest bronchioles. Each alveolus is a thin-walled bubble surrounded by a network of equally delicate capillaries. The walls of both the alveolus and the capillary are just one cell thick, allowing gases to move easily from one side to the other. The space between them, the respiratory membrane, is so thin that oxygen and carbon dioxide pass across it almost instantly. When fresh air enters the alveoli during inhalation, it contains a higher concentration of oxygen than the blood arriving in the surrounding capillaries. This difference in concentration, known as a gradient, is what drives the movement of oxygen into the blood. Molecules naturally move from areas where they are more concentrated to areas where they are less concentrated, a process called diffusion. As oxygen diffuses across the respiratory membrane, it binds to hemoglobin in the red blood cells, creating a bright red compound called oxyhemoglobin. This binding allows the blood to carry far more oxygen than it could simply dissolve in plasma alone. At the same time, the blood arriving in the capillaries has a higher concentration of carbon dioxide than the air in the alveoli. This carbon dioxide has been produced in the body's cells as a natural byproduct of energy production. It too diffuses across the respiratory membrane, but in the opposite direction, moving from the blood into the air inside the alveoli. Some of the carbon dioxide is carried dissolved in plasma, some is bound to hemoglobin, and most is carried in the form of bicarbonate ions. As the blood passes through the lungs, these bicarbonate ions are converted back into carbon dioxide gas, ready to be exhaled. This entire exchange happens in less than a second, yet it is complete and efficient under normal conditions. The constant flow of blood through the capillaries ensures that there is always a fresh supply of carbon dioxide to remove, and that oxygen-depleted blood is quickly replenished. Similarly, the movement of air in and out of the alveoli keeps the oxygen concentration high and the carbon dioxide concentration low in the air spaces, maintaining the gradients that make diffusion possible. The efficiency of this exchange is influenced by several factors. The enormous surface area of the alveoli, roughly the size of a tennis court when unfolded, provides ample space for gas transfer. The thinness of the respiratory membrane minimizes the distance gases must travel. The close match between ventilation, airflow, and perfusion, blood flow, in the lungs ensures that areas with the most air also receive the most blood, maximizing exchange in every breath. Even subtle adjustments can occur to maintain balance. If a particular area of the lung receives less airflow, the small arteries in that region may constrict, directing blood to better ventilated areas. This local control helps keep oxygen uptake and carbon dioxide removal as effective as possible. Even if part of the lung is temporarily less active, the gases themselves behave in predictable ways. Oxygen, once bound to hemoglobin, is carried swiftly to the tissues. Hemoglobin's ability to pick up oxygen in the lungs and release it in the tissues is influenced by factors like temperature, pH, and the concentration of carbon dioxide, all of which can shift subtly depending on the body's activity level. This adaptability ensures that oxygen delivery is highest where it is needed most, such as in active muscles, and reduced in areas at rest. Carbon dioxide, though often thought of simply as a waste product, plays an important role in regulating breathing. Specialized receptors in the brain and in the arteries monitor the level of carbon dioxide in the blood. If it begins to rise, the breathing rate and depth increase, bringing in more oxygen and expelling more carbon dioxide. This feedback loop operates continuously, fine-tuning breathing with each moment. At rest, the process is calm and steady. Each inhalation brings fresh air into the alveoli. Each exhalation carries away carbon dioxide, and the blood leaving the lungs is fully oxygenated. During exercise, the entire process accelerates. The breathing rate increases, the heart pumps faster, and more oxygen is transferred into the blood with each breath. Even then, the sequence of events remains the same. The exchange just happening at a faster pace to keep up with the body's demands. Despite its constant activity, the exchange of gases in the lungs is something we rarely notice. The muscles of breathing work in the background. The airways open and close silently, and the alveoli carry out their work without sensation. Yet this quiet process sustains every other function in the body, from the firing of neurons in the brain to the contraction of muscle fibers in the limbs. In the stillness of rest, this exchange has a kind of gentle rhythm. Inhalation fills the alveoli. Oxygen moves into the blood. Carbon dioxide moves into the air. Exhalation carries it away, and the cycle begins again. It is a simple pattern, repeated thousands of times a day. Each repetition is vital as the one before. In the next part, we will follow the respiratory system beyond the lungs, exploring how breathing is regulated, how the body senses its needs, and how this control keeps oxygen and carbon dioxide in perfect balance no matter what the day brings. 11. Regulation of breathing. Breathing is one of the few bodily processes that can happen entirely without conscious thought, yet can also be brought under voluntary control. Most of the time, it runs quietly in the background, a rhythmic rise and fall of the chest that adjusts itself to the body's needs without us ever having to think about it. But if we choose, we can slow it, quicken it, or even pause it for a moment. This balance between automatic control and conscious influence is one of the remarkable features of the respiratory system. The automatic regulation of breathing is managed by specialized centers in the brainstem, particularly in the medulla oblongata and the pons. These centers act like a natural metronome, sending rhythmic signals to the muscles of breathing, the diaphragm, and the intercostal muscles between the ribs. When these muscles receive the signal to contract, air is drawn into the lungs. When the signal stops, the muscles relax and air flows out. This basic rhythm is constant but not fixed. It changes depending on signals the brainstem receives about the body's current condition. The primary driver of breathing rate and depth is not, as many might assume, the level of oxygen in the blood, but rather the level of carbon dioxide. As cells in the body produce energy, they release carbon dioxide as a byproduct, which enters the bloodstream. A portion of this carbon dioxide is carried dissolved in plasma. Some binds to hemoglobin, and most is transported as bicarbonate ions. The presence of carbon dioxide in the blood slightly increases its acidity, and it is this change in acidity that the brain's breathing centers are most sensitive to. Chemoreceptors, specialized cells that monitor the chemical composition of the blood, play a key role in this process. Central chemoreceptors, located in the medulla, detect changes in the acidity of the fluid surrounding the brain. Peripheral chemoreceptors, found in the carotid arteries and the aorta, sense both carbon dioxide and oxygen levels in the blood. When carbon dioxide levels rise, or oxygen levels fall below a certain point, these receptors send rapid signals to the brainstem, which in turn increases the rate and depth of breathing. This adjustment brings in more oxygen and expels more carbon dioxide, returning the blood to balance. Other factors can influence breathing as well. Movement sensors in the muscles and joints send information to the brain, increasing breathing even before oxygen levels drop during physical activity. Emotional states, processed in higher brain regions, can alter breathing patterns. Excitement, stress, and fear may quicken the breath, while calm and relaxation can slow it. Pain, temperature changes, and even the act of speaking or singing also have their effects, temporarily overriding the automatic rhythm to match the body's needs or intentions. The coordination between the respiratory and circulatory systems is central to this regulation. Faster breathing alone would not be effective without a corresponding increase in heart rate and blood flow, and so these systems adjust together. The nervous system ensures that oxygen uptake in the lungs matches delivery to the tissues, and that carbon dioxide removal is balanced with its production. During rest, breathing is usually slow and steady, around 12 to 20 breaths per minute for most adults. The diaphragm moves in a relaxed pattern, drawing in just enough air to meet the body's demands. The oxygen level in the blood remains high, while carbon dioxide levels are kept within a narrow range. During physical exertion, the breathing rate can increase several times over, the depth of each breath also growing larger to maximize the amount of air reaching the alveoli. This combination of faster and deeper breaths is far more efficient than simply breathing more quickly without increasing depth. Breathing can also be voluntarily adjusted for specific purposes. Deep breathing can help slow the heart rate and promote relaxation. Breath holding, though limited by the body's tolerance to rising carbon dioxide, can be extended with training, as seen in free divers. Singing, playing wind instruments, and certain forms of meditation all require conscious control of breathing, demonstrating the flexibility of this system. Even while we sleep, breathing continues under the control of the brainstem. The rhythm may change slightly between deeper and lighter stages of sleep, but the automatic centers maintain a steady exchange of gases. This is a reminder that the regulation of breathing is designed for constancy. It adapts quickly to changes, yet never ceases entirely unless life itself ends. In a healthy body, the regulation of breathing is so seamless that we rarely notice it. Each adjustment happens without effort or thought. The rise and fall of the chest matches the needs of the moment, whether at rest, in motion, or in sleep. The lungs, diaphragm, and brainstem work together in quiet harmony, sustaining the balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide with each breath. As we continue our journey, we will look more closely at the cooperation between the respiratory and circulatory systems, how the work of the lungs and the movement of the blood are linked in a partnership that sustains life in every moment. 12. How the respiratory and circulatory systems work together. The respiratory and circulatory systems are often described as separate, each with its own set of organs, pathways, and processes. But in reality, they are two halves of a single, continuous system of exchange. Neither can fully perform its purpose without the other, and their partnership is one of the most elegantly coordinated functions in the human body. The lungs and airways bring in oxygen and remove carbon dioxide, while the heart and vessels carry these gases to and from the tissues. Together, they create a loop that never pauses, a rhythm as constant as life itself. This cooperation begins with the simple act of inhalation. As the diaphragm contracts and the chest expands, air enters the lungs, traveling through the branching bronchi and bronchioles until it reaches the alveoli. At the same time, the heart's right ventricle sends oxygen-poor blood into the pulmonary arteries, which carry it to those same alveoli. Here, the two systems meet. Air in the alveoli and blood in the capillaries are separated only by the thin respiratory membrane. Oxygen diffuses into the blood, binding to hemoglobin in red blood cells, while carbon dioxide moves from the blood into the air, ready to be exhaled. Once the blood has been replenished with oxygen, it flows through the pulmonary veins to the left atrium of the heart. From there, it enters the left ventricle, whose strong contractions send it into the systemic circulation through the aorta. The oxygen-rich blood travels through arteries and arterioles until it reaches the capillaries in the tissues. Here, the second part of the partnership unfolds. Oxygen leaves the blood and enters the cells, while carbon dioxide, produced by cellular metabolism, moves into the blood. This exchange in the tissues mirrors the one in the lungs, but in reverse. Oxygen out, carbon dioxide in. The circulatory system's role is to connect these two sites of exchange, the lungs and the tissues, in a continuous loop. Without the movement of blood, oxygen absorbed in the lungs would remain in place and never reach the cells that need it. Without the delivery of carbon dioxide back to the lungs, it would accumulate in the tissues, disrupting the body's chemical balance. The respiratory system depends on the circulatory system to move gases, and the circulatory system depends on the respiratory system to refresh them. This cooperation is not fixed, but adjusts to the body's needs. During rest, the heart pumps more slowly, and breathing is gentle. Blood moves steadily through the pulmonary and systemic circuits, and oxygen uptake matches the modest demands of the tissues. During activity, both systems accelerate. Breathing becomes deeper and faster, increasing the amount of oxygen entering the lungs and the amount of carbon dioxide leaving. At the same time, the heart beats faster and more forcefully, moving blood more quickly between the lungs and the tissues. These adjustments happen in perfect synchrony, so that the supply of oxygen meets the rising demand without interruption. Communication between the two systems is constant. The brainstem monitors carbon dioxide levels in the blood and adjusts the breathing rate accordingly. When breathing changes, the heart responds, altering its rhythm to maintain the right balance between airflow and blood flow. Hormones and nervous system signals also help coordinate the two systems, ensuring that changes in one are matched by changes in the other. Even subtle shifts in posture or activity are mirrored in both systems. When you lie down, blood flow through the lungs changes slightly, and breathing adjusts to match. When you stand or begin walking, the heart rate rises a little, and the breathing rate follows suit. These small changes happen automatically, often before oxygen levels have time to drop, demonstrating the anticipatory nature of the body's control systems. The efficiency of this partnership is due in part to the matching of ventilation and perfusion. Ventilation refers to the movement of air into and out of the alveoli, while perfusion refers to the flow of blood through the surrounding capillaries. In a healthy lung, these two processes are balanced so that areas receiving the most air also receive the most blood. If part of the lung is less active, blood flow to that region decreases, redirecting it to areas where gas exchange is better. This matching ensures that every heartbeat and every breath contribute fully to the exchange of gases. The relationship between the respiratory and circulatory systems is also seen in their shared rhythms. The heartbeat and breathing cycle are distinct yet intertwined. With each breath, tiny changes occur in the heart rate, a phenomenon called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. This natural variation allows for more efficient gas exchange and reflects the deep connection between the two systems. In moments of stillness, their partnership is quiet but unbroken. The lungs fill and empty, the heart contracts and relaxes, and the two systems pass oxygen and carbon dioxide back and forth in a seamless cycle. Even in sleep, when consciousness fades, their work continues, sustaining every organ, every cell. In the next part, we will explore how oxygen travels from the lungs to the tissues in greater detail, following it step by step as it moves from the air we breathe into the beating heart, through the vessels, and into the living cells where it is finally used. 13. The transport of oxygen from lungs to tissues. Oxygen's journey through the body begins the moment it enters the alveoli of the lungs. From that point forward, it follows a carefully guided path, moving from the thin film of air inside the alveoli into the bloodstream, through the heart, along the branching network of vessels, and finally into the body's cells. This journey is constant and silent, repeated with every breath and every heartbeat, yet it is one of the most vital processes in life. In the alveoli, the oxygen molecules find themselves separated from the blood by only the delicate respiratory membrane. This barrier is so thin, just a single cell layer from the alveolar wall and a single cell layer from the capillary wall, that diffusion happens quickly. The oxygen, present in higher concentration in the alveolar air than in the blood arriving from the pulmonary arteries, moves naturally down its gradient into the plasma. Almost immediately, it binds to hemoglobin, the specialized protein found in red blood cells. Each hemoglobin molecule can carry up to 4 oxygen molecules, holding them securely for transport but releasing them when needed. The blood, now rich in oxygen, takes on a bright red color and flows from the pulmonary capillaries into the pulmonary veins. These veins carry the oxygenated blood to the left atrium of the heart, where it passes through the mitral valve into the left ventricle. With the next heartbeat, the left ventricle contracts powerfully, sending this oxygen-rich blood into the aorta, the largest artery in the body. From here, the journey branches outward. The aorta divides into major arteries that lead to the head, arms, abdomen, and legs. Each of these arteries divides into smaller vessels called arterioles, which continue to narrow until they become capillaries. The red blood cells travel in single file through these capillaries, bringing their load of oxygen into close proximity with the tissues. The release of oxygen from hemoglobin is not random but influenced by local conditions. In tissues that are actively working, such as muscles during exercise, the temperature is slightly higher, the carbon dioxide concentration is greater, and the pH is slightly lower. These conditions reduce hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen, causing it to release its load more readily. This effect, known as the Bohr effect, ensures that the tissues in greatest need receive the most oxygen. In contrast, in tissues at rest, where oxygen demand is lower, hemoglobin holds onto its oxygen more tightly, releasing only what is necessary. This selective delivery is one of the reasons the body can adapt so smoothly to changes in activity without conscious effort. Once oxygen leaves the red blood cell, it diffuses across the thin walls of the capillaries into the surrounding tissue fluid, and from there into the cells themselves. Inside the cells, oxygen moves into the mitochondria, the tiny structures where energy production takes place. Here, oxygen is used in the process of cellular respiration, combining with nutrients from food to produce adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, the molecule that powers nearly all cellular activities. As oxygen is used, carbon dioxide is produced and begins its own journey back toward the lungs. This exchange of gases in the tissues is as important as the exchange in the lungs, for it is the reason oxygen was transported in the first place. Without this final step, the delivery of oxygen to the mitochondria, the work of breathing and circulation, would have no purpose. The transport of oxygen depends on the continuous cooperation of the respiratory and circulatory systems. The lungs must bring in fresh oxygen with every breath. The heart must pump steadily to move blood to the tissues, and the vessels must remain open and flexible to deliver it. Even a brief interruption in any part of this pathway can affect the supply of oxygen to the cells. At rest, the body uses only a portion of the oxygen carried in the blood. This reserve allows for quick adaptation to sudden increases in demand, such as when beginning to walk after sitting, or reacting quickly to a sound or movement. During sustained physical activity, the proportion of oxygen extracted from the blood increases, and both breathing and heart rate rise to match the higher consumption. This quiet, dependable movement of oxygen from the air we breathe to the deepest tissues of the body is a reminder of how every part of the body is connected. The breath we take in a moment of stillness might be delivering oxygen to cells in the brain, in the fingertips, or in the muscles of the feet, all at the same time. The cycle is never exactly the same twice, yet it never truly changes, repeating with every breath and heartbeat for as long as we live. In the next part, we will follow the return journey, how carbon dioxide, the natural companion of oxygen in this exchange, is carried from the tissues back to the lungs, and how the body ensures that this waste gas is removed efficiently with each exhalation. 14. The return of carbon dioxide from tissues to lungs. As oxygen completes its journey into the cells and is used to create energy, another molecule emerges in its place: carbon dioxide. This gas is a natural product of cellular respiration, formed as nutrients are broken down inside the mitochondria to release energy. It is as constant in its production as oxygen is in its delivery. Once created, carbon dioxide cannot remain in the tissues. If it were to build up, it would alter the chemical balance of the body, making the blood more acidic and disrupting the delicate environment in which cells operate. And so, with each heartbeat, the return journey begins: a movement from the tissues, through the bloodstream, and back to the lungs, where carbon dioxide can be released into the air. The first step in this return is the movement of carbon dioxide out of the cells. Just as oxygen diffuses into the cells along a concentration gradient, carbon dioxide diffuses out, moving from the tissue fluid across the capillary walls and into the blood. From here, it travels in three main forms. A small portion, about 7 to 10%, dissolves directly in the plasma, where it remains as a gas. Another portion, around 20 to 25%, binds to hemoglobin, but at a different site than oxygen does, forming a compound known as carbaminohemoglobin. The largest portion, roughly 65 to 70%, is carried in the form of bicarbonate ions, the result of a reversible chemical reaction inside red blood cells. In this reaction, carbon dioxide combines with water to form carbonic acid, a process catalyzed by the enzyme carbonic anhydrase. Carbonic acid then quickly breaks down into bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. The bicarbonate moves out into the plasma, where it is carried to the lungs, while the hydrogen ions are buffered by hemoglobin, helping to maintain the blood's pH within a narrow range. This chemical transformation allows the blood to carry far more carbon dioxide than it could in dissolved form alone. The journey of carbon dioxide through the bloodstream is closely linked with the flow of blood itself. In the systemic veins, the levels of carbon dioxide are higher than in the systemic arteries, reflecting the gas collected from the tissues. These veins converge into the larger vessels, the superior and inferior vena cava, which return the blood to the right atrium of the heart. From there, the blood moves into the right ventricle and is pumped into the pulmonary arteries, beginning the final leg of its trip. As the blood flows into the capillaries surrounding the alveoli, the conditions shift once again. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood is now higher than in the air within the alveoli, and the gradient drives its diffusion across the respiratory membrane. At the same time, the bicarbonate ions in the plasma begin to move back into the red blood cells, where they are converted once more into carbonic acid and then into carbon dioxide and water. The carbon dioxide, whether newly freed from bicarbonate or released from hemoglobin, passes easily into the alveolar air. This entire reversal happens smoothly and quickly. With each exhalation, the carbon dioxide leaves the lungs and enters the surrounding air, completing its journey. The cycle is then ready to repeat, with each breath clearing away the carbon dioxide produced since the last one. The removal of carbon dioxide is just as important as the delivery of oxygen. It is not merely a waste gas to be discarded. It plays an essential role in regulating breathing. Specialized sensors in the brainstem and in the major arteries detect changes in carbon dioxide levels almost immediately. If levels begin to rise, the brain responds by increasing the rate and depth of breathing, ensuring that the gas is expelled more quickly. This constant monitoring keeps the body's chemistry balanced, even as activity levels change. During rest, the removal of carbon dioxide is a quiet, steady process. The breathing rate remains low, and the gas is expelled at the same pace it is produced. During physical activity, production of carbon dioxide increases, and breathing adjusts accordingly, becoming deeper and faster to keep pace. Even in moments of sudden effort, such as climbing a set of stairs, the adjustment is swift, preventing any significant buildup. This seamless return journey of carbon dioxide mirrors the forward journey of oxygen, the two processes interwoven in every breath. Oxygen enters as carbon dioxide leaves, and the movement of blood through the lungs allows both exchanges to happen at once, without interruption. In the next part, we will explore the delicate balance between oxygen delivery and carbon dioxide removal, how the body keeps these two flows perfectly matched, no matter the conditions, to sustain the chemistry of life. 15. The balance between oxygen delivery and carbon dioxide removal. The exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide is not a set of two separate processes running side by side. It is one unified system, balanced so precisely that any disruption to one side immediately affects the other. Oxygen delivery and carbon dioxide removal are linked through every breath, every heartbeat, and every movement of blood through the body. This balance ensures that the cells receive the oxygen they need to produce energy, while also preventing carbon dioxide from accumulating to levels that would alter the body's chemistry. It is a dynamic equilibrium, constantly adjusted to meet changing conditions. At the core of this balance is the close relationship between the respiratory and circulatory systems. When the heart pumps blood through the lungs, two exchanges happen at once. Oxygen enters the blood, and carbon dioxide leaves it. These events occur across the same thin respiratory membrane, in the same alveoli, during the same moment in time. If either exchange is slowed or limited, the other will be affected. For example, if airflow into the lungs is reduced, less oxygen is available for absorption, and less carbon dioxide can be released. Similarly, if blood flow through the lungs is restricted, neither oxygen uptake nor carbon dioxide removal can occur efficiently. The body's regulation of breathing is centered on maintaining this dual balance. The brainstem's respiratory centers continuously monitor levels of carbon dioxide, oxygen, and the pH of the blood. Small rises in carbon dioxide are usually the first trigger for changes in breathing. As carbon dioxide levels increase, breathing becomes deeper and more frequent, bringing more oxygen into the alveoli and flushing out the excess carbon dioxide. In this way, the same adjustment, faster breathing, corrects both sides of the balance simultaneously. This coordination is also seen in how the circulatory system responds to the body's needs. When physical activity begins, muscles consume more oxygen and produce more carbon dioxide. The heart responds by pumping more quickly and forcefully, increasing the delivery of oxygen-rich blood to the muscles and speeding the transport of carbon dioxide back to the lungs. The respiratory system matches this increase in blood flow by raising the rate and depth of breathing, ensuring that the blood returning to the body remains rich in oxygen and low in carbon dioxide. Even at rest, the body makes fine adjustments to preserve balance. Small shifts in posture, changes in temperature, or variations in emotional state can subtly alter the demand for oxygen or the production of carbon dioxide. Without conscious effort, breathing patterns and heart rate adapt to keep both gases in the right proportion. This responsiveness is so smooth that we are rarely aware of it, unless our breathing is deliberately altered or our body is suddenly challenged by exertion. One of the key factors in maintaining this balance is the matching of ventilation, the movement of air into and out of the lungs with perfusion, the flow of blood through the pulmonary capillaries. In healthy lungs, areas that receive the most airflow also receive the most blood flow, and areas with less airflow receive less blood. This matching ensures that oxygen delivery and carbon dioxide removal occur as efficiently as possible in every part of the lung. If a region of the lung becomes less active, for example, due to temporary airway narrowing, blood vessels in that area constrict, redirecting flow to better ventilated regions. The balance is also preserved by the properties of hemoglobin. This protein not only carries oxygen, but also helps buffer the acidity of the blood, which is influenced by carbon dioxide levels. In active tissues, where carbon dioxide levels are higher and pH is lower, hemoglobin releases oxygen more readily, delivering it exactly where it is most needed. At the same time, the blood carries carbon dioxide away from these tissues to be released in the lungs. There is a kind of elegant symmetry in the way oxygen delivery and carbon dioxide removal mirror each other. Oxygen moves from the lungs to the tissues along the same path that carbon dioxide follows in reverse. The two flows meet in the capillaries of the tissues and in the capillaries of the lungs, exchanging places without interruption. This symmetry means that anything that benefits one side, such as increased airflow or improved blood circulation, also benefits the other. When the balance is maintained, the body's internal environment stays stable, a condition known as homeostasis. Oxygen levels remain high enough to sustain energy production, and carbon dioxide levels stay low enough to prevent harmful shifts in pH. This stability supports the function of every organ, from the smallest cluster of cells to the brain itself, which depends heavily on a steady supply of oxygen and careful control of acidity. In moments of deep rest, the balance is calm and steady, the exchange gentle but unbroken. In moments of activity, it becomes more vigorous, with each breath and heartbeat working to keep pace with the body's needs. In both cases, the coordination between oxygen delivery and carbon dioxide removal is seamless, a quiet rhythm that underlies every other process in the body. In the next part, we will explore how the body's demand for oxygen changes during activity, how the systems adjust to meet these demands, and how the balance between oxygen and carbon dioxide is preserved even in the face of rapid or intense exertion. 16. Oxygen demands. During activity, when the body shifts from rest into activity, the demand for oxygen rises almost immediately. Muscles that were using only a modest amount of oxygen begin to consume it at a far greater rate, fueling the increased production of energy needed for movement. At the same time, these muscles produce more carbon dioxide as a byproduct of their work. The combined effect of these changes sets into motion a series of adjustments in both the respiratory and circulatory systems, ensuring that oxygen delivery and carbon dioxide removal remain perfectly matched to the body's needs. The first sign of this transition is an increase in breathing rate and depth, often occurring before the muscles have even begun to consume much more oxygen. This early adjustment is triggered by signals from the nervous system in anticipation of activity, as well as from receptors in the muscles and joints that detect movement. The diaphragm and other breathing muscles respond by working more forcefully, drawing in more air with each inhalation and expelling more carbon dioxide with each exhalation. This rapid response ensures that oxygen levels in the alveoli remain high and that the gradient for oxygen diffusion into the blood is maintained. Simultaneously, The heart responds with a faster and more powerful beat. Cardiac output, the volume of blood pumped per minute increases, sometimes doubling or tripling from its resting value during intense activity. This increase comes from both a faster heart rate and a greater stroke volume, meaning each beat sends out more blood. The result is a rapid circulation of oxygen-rich blood to the working muscles and a quick return of oxygen-poor, carbon dioxide-rich blood to the lungs. Within the muscles themselves, changes occur to improve oxygen extraction. Blood vessels dilate, increasing blood flow to the active areas while reducing it to organs and tissues that do not require as much at the moment. The higher temperature, increased carbon dioxide, and lower pH in these muscles all contribute to the Bohr effect, in which hemoglobin releases oxygen more easily. This targeted release ensures that oxygen is delivered precisely where it is most urgently needed, without being wasted in tissues that are at rest. As activity continues, the body's oxygen consumption reaches a new, higher steady state. The respiratory and circulatory systems settle into a coordinated rhythm, delivering and removing gases at a rate that matches the muscle's demands. In moderate, sustained activity, this balance can be maintained for long periods, with oxygen delivery keeping pace with use and carbon dioxide removal preventing harmful buildup. During high-intensity activity, the demand for oxygen may exceed the body's ability to supply it entirely through aerobic means. In these situations, muscles begin to supplement their energy production with anaerobic processes, which do not require oxygen but lead to the accumulation of lactic acid. While this shift allows activity to continue, it also signals to the body that breathing and circulation must work even harder to restore balance. Breathing becomes rapid and deep, the heart pumps at near its maximum capacity, and blood flow is directed even more strongly toward the active muscles. Recovery from intense activity is also an oxygen-dependent process. Even after the muscles stop contracting, the body requires extra oxygen to clear lactic acid, replenish depleted energy stores, and restore the blood's oxygen levels. This phase, sometimes called excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, can keep breathing and heart rate elevated for several minutes or even longer after the activity ends. An important feature of oxygen demand during activity is the efficiency with which the body can adjust to varying levels of exertion. Whether the activity is a gentle walk, a steady jog, or a sprint, the respiratory and circulatory systems adapt almost instantly to changes in workload. This adaptability allows for smooth transitions between rest, moderate activity, and intense effort, without sudden drops in oxygen or rises in carbon dioxide. The balance between oxygen delivery and use during activity depends not only on the lungs and heart, but also on the health of the blood and vessels. Sufficient hemoglobin is needed to carry oxygen. Healthy arteries and capillaries are needed to deliver it, and flexible veins are needed to return blood efficiently to the heart. Any limitation in one part of this chain can affect the body's ability to meet increased oxygen demands, making the coordination of all components essential. In moments of rest, oxygen delivery is a quiet background process. In moments of activity, it becomes a finely tuned, high-speed operation, with every breath and heartbeat working to keep the muscles supplied. The speed of this transition, the precision of the adjustments, and the seamless integration of breathing and circulation are what allow humans to move from stillness into action without pause. In the next part, we will look closely at the reverse side of this equation, how carbon dioxide removal changes during activity, and how the body ensures that this gas is cleared quickly enough to keep the internal environment stable, even during the most demanding exertion. 17. Carbon dioxide removal during activity. When the body moves from rest into physical activity, The changes in oxygen delivery are matched by equally important adjustments in carbon dioxide removal. As muscles work harder, they burn more fuel to produce energy, and with this increased energy production comes a greater release of carbon dioxide. This gas is not simply a waste product to be discarded, it plays an active role in regulating breathing and blood flow. Its rapid removal during activity is essential to keeping the body's chemical balance, especially blood pH, within safe limits. The first change in carbon dioxide handling during activity happens almost instantly. Even before significant amounts of extra carbon dioxide are produced in the muscles, the breathing rate and depth begin to increase. This anticipatory response is triggered by signals from the brain's motor centers and from sensors in the muscles and joints that detect movement. The respiratory system begins clearing more carbon dioxide before the levels in the blood have had a chance to rise significantly, helping to prevent any sudden imbalance. As the activity continues, the actual production of carbon dioxide increases. In working muscles, oxygen is used to break down glucose and fatty acids in the mitochondria, producing energy in the form of ATP. The breakdown of these fuels generates carbon dioxide, which diffuses from the muscle cells into the surrounding tissue fluid, and then into the blood in the nearby capillaries. Once in the blood, carbon dioxide takes three main forms for its journey to the lungs. A small fraction dissolves directly into the plasma. Another portion binds to hemoglobin, forming carbaminohemoglobin, but the majority is carried as bicarbonate ions, produced inside red blood cells by the action of the enzyme carbonic anhydrase. This reaction combines carbon dioxide with water to form carbonic acid, which quickly splits into bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. The bicarbonate moves into the plasma, where it is transported to the lungs. This pathway allows the blood to carry far more carbon dioxide than it could in dissolved form alone. The increased movement of blood during activity accelerates the transport of carbon dioxide back to the lungs. The heart pumps more quickly and forcefully, reducing the time it takes for blood to complete the circuit from the muscles to the lungs. At the same time, blood vessels in active muscles widen, increasing blood flow and helping to carry carbon dioxide away more rapidly. The veins from the working muscles return this gas-rich blood to the right side of the heart, from where it is pumped into the pulmonary arteries and into the capillaries surrounding the alveoli. When the blood reaches the lungs, the conditions shift to favor the release of carbon dioxide. The concentration of the gas is higher in the blood than in the air inside the alveoli, so it diffuses naturally across the respiratory membrane into the air. Bicarbonate ions re-enter red blood cells, where they are converted back into carbon dioxide and water. Carbon dioxide also detaches from hemoglobin as oxygen binds in its place, a process that helps ensure the lungs can release as much of the gas as possible. With each exhalation, during intense activity, the breathing pattern changes to accommodate the extra load. Both the rate and depth of breaths increase, and the diaphragm and other breathing muscles work harder to move larger volumes of air in and out. This rapid turnover of air in the alveoli maintains a low concentration of carbon dioxide inside them, keeping the gradient for diffusion high and the clearance of the gas efficient. The control of breathing during activity is especially sensitive to carbon dioxide levels. Even small increases in blood carbon dioxide stimulate the respiratory centers in the brainstem to increase ventilation. This feedback loop ensures that removal keeps pace with production. At the same time, the respiratory system is influenced by chemical sensors in the arteries that monitor oxygen levels and pH. If carbon dioxide production pushes the blood toward acidity, breathing adjustments are made quickly to restore the balance. Once the activity ends, carbon dioxide removal does not immediately return to resting levels. The body continues to produce extra carbon dioxide as it processes the byproducts of exercise, clears lactic acid, and restores energy stores. breathing and heart rate remain elevated during this recovery period, allowing the excess gas to be removed and the blood chemistry to return to its steady state. The removal of carbon dioxide during activity is as important as the delivery of oxygen. Both processes happen at the same sites in the tissues and in the lungs, and both depend on the same flow of blood and air. The more active the muscles, the more quickly the cycle must run, with oxygen arriving and carbon dioxide departing in perfect step. In the next part, we will bring these ideas together by exploring how the body manages the full cycle of gases during sustained exertion, maintaining stability in the face of changing demands, and ensuring that every cell receives exactly what it needs, while safely discarding what it no longer requires. 18. The full cycle of gases during sustained exertion. When the body settles into a steady period of physical activity, the movement of oxygen into the body and carbon dioxide out of it becomes part of a single, continuous cycle. Each breath brings in fresh oxygen. Each heartbeat moves that oxygen to the tissues, and at the same time, each return of blood to the lungs carries away carbon dioxide. This process does not occur in two separate stages but in one connected rhythm, repeated again and again as long as the activity continues. The cycle begins with inhalation. As the diaphragm contracts and the rib cage expands, drawing air into the lungs, the incoming air travels through the airways to the alveoli, where oxygen levels are higher than in the blood arriving from the pulmonary arteries. This difference in concentration, the gradient, allows oxygen to diffuse across the thin respiratory membrane into the capillaries. There, it binds to hemoglobin inside red blood cells, forming oxyhemoglobin. This binding greatly increases the amount of oxygen the blood can carry, ensuring that it can supply even the most active muscles. At the same time, carbon dioxide in the blood is more concentrated than in the alveolar air. It moves in the opposite direction, diffusing into the alveoli. This movement is supported by the conversion of bicarbonate back into carbon dioxide inside the red blood cells, a reaction catalyzed by carbonic anhydrase. Carbon dioxide also detaches from hemoglobin as oxygen takes its place, ensuring that both exchanges, oxygen entering and carbon dioxide leaving, are complete before the blood leaves the lungs. Once the blood is rich in oxygen and low in carbon dioxide, it travels through the pulmonary veins to the left side of the heart. From there, it is pumped into the systemic circulation, moving rapidly through arteries and into the capillaries of active muscles. In these tissues, the process is reversed. Oxygen leaves the hemoglobin and diffuses into the cells, where it enters the mitochondria to help produce energy in the form of ATP. In the process, carbon dioxide is generated and begins its return trip by diffusing into the blood. This constant back and forth flow of gases is finely tuned to the body's needs. In steady exertion, the rate of oxygen delivery matches the rate of oxygen use, and the rate of carbon dioxide removal matches its production. This balance is achieved through adjustments in breathing rate, breathing depth, heart rate, and the distribution of blood flow. For example, more blood is directed to the active muscles, while less is sent to areas like the digestive system. At the same time, ventilation of the lungs increases so that the alveoli can handle the greater exchange of gases. The regulation of this cycle relies on feedback from sensors throughout the body. Chemoreceptors in the brainstem and major arteries monitor carbon dioxide levels, oxygen levels, and blood pH. If carbon dioxide begins to accumulate, they signal the respiratory muscles to increase ventilation, bringing in more oxygen and clearing the excess carbon dioxide. Mechanoreceptors in the muscles and joints send signals about movement, prompting early adjustments in breathing and heart rate even before chemical changes occur. During sustained exertion, the entire system reaches a steady state where the intake of oxygen and the release of carbon dioxide are balanced with the demands of the activity. In this state, the body can maintain the pace for long periods without significant fatigue. The heart and lungs work in harmony. The muscles receive a steady flow of oxygen, and waste gases are removed as quickly as they are produced. This harmony depends on several key physical and chemical principles. The diffusion of gases across membranes is driven by concentration gradients, which are maintained by the continuous movement of air in the lungs and blood in the vessels. Hemoglobin's ability to bind oxygen in the lungs and release it in the tissues is influenced by temperature, acidity, and carbon dioxide levels, all of which are higher in active muscles, helping to ensure that oxygen is delivered exactly where it is needed. Carbon dioxide removal is equally efficient. As it leaves the tissues, it is carried partly dissolved in plasma, partly bound to hemoglobin, and mostly as bicarbonate. These forms allow the blood to transport large amounts of the gas without major changes in acidity. When the blood reaches the lungs, the conversion back to carbon dioxide gas allows it to be exhaled, completing the cycle. Even in steady exertion, small changes in activity can shift the balance. A hill to climb, a sudden change in pace, or a burst of effort can cause temporary mismatches between oxygen use and delivery, or between carbon dioxide production and removal. The body responds quickly, increasing ventilation and circulation to restore the balance. Once the challenge passes, the systems settle back into their coordinated rhythm. This cycle is not just a matter of delivering and removing gases. It is the foundation for the body's energy supply during activity. Without a steady supply of oxygen, the muscles cannot sustain aerobic metabolism, and without efficient removal of carbon dioxide, the blood's pH would quickly shift, impairing muscle function. The constant exchange between lungs, heart, and muscles allows for sustained movement without harmful buildup or dangerous shortages. In the next part, we will examine what happens when the demand for oxygen becomes greater than the body's ability to deliver it, how the body transitions into anaerobic metabolism, the consequences for carbon dioxide handling, and how recovery brings the balance back to normal. 19. When oxygen demand exceeds supply. There are moments during intense physical effort when the body's need for oxygen rises faster than it can be delivered. This usually occurs in high-intensity, short-duration activities, sprinting, heavy lifting, or sudden bursts of speed where the muscles work at or near their maximum capacity. In these moments, even with the heart pumping rapidly and the lungs working at full volume, oxygen delivery cannot fully meet the muscles' demands. When this point is reached, the body turns to another pathway for energy production. Anaerobic metabolism. Under normal aerobic conditions, oxygen enters the muscle cells and is used in the mitochondria to break down glucose and fatty acids into ATP, the energy currency of the cell. This process is highly efficient and produces carbon dioxide and water as its only byproducts. But when oxygen delivery falls short, the mitochondria cannot process fuel at the required rate. The body compensates by breaking down glucose without oxygen, a process that occurs in the fluid portion of the cell, the cytoplasm. This pathway, anaerobic glycolysis, produces ATP quickly, allowing the muscles to keep working for a short time, even without enough oxygen. However, anaerobic metabolism has a drawback. Instead of carbon dioxide and water, it produces lactic acid. In the body, this lactic acid quickly separates into lactate and hydrogen ions. The hydrogen ions can make the muscle environment more acidic, interfering with the chemical reactions needed for muscle contraction. This acidity is one of the factors that contributes to the sensation of fatigue during intense exertion. While anaerobic metabolism is taking place, oxygen delivery is still continuing. just not at a rate sufficient to meet the total demand. The respiratory system is working at or near its maximum, with rapid, deep breaths to draw in as much oxygen as possible and to help remove the excess carbon dioxide. At the same time, the heart is beating quickly, moving blood through the lungs and to the muscles as fast as it can. But even with this effort, the gap between oxygen need and oxygen delivery remains, and the anaerobic pathway continues to contribute to energy production. Carbon dioxide handling changes in this state as well. Some of the extra carbon dioxide comes directly from the breakdown of glucose in the mitochondria, as in aerobic metabolism, but another portion comes indirectly from buffering the hydrogen ions released during lactic acid production. Hemoglobin and other proteins in the blood bind to these hydrogen ions, and in the process, more carbon dioxide is generated for removal in the lungs. This is one reason that breathing becomes especially intense. During and after high-effort activity, the body is clearing not only the usual metabolic carbon dioxide, but also the additional load from buffering acidity. When the intense activity stops, the body enters a recovery phase. During this time, oxygen delivery remains elevated, even though the muscles are no longer working as hard. This extra oxygen is used to restore the balance that was disrupted during anaerobic metabolism. It helps convert lactate back into glucose or other usable fuels, replenish energy stores in the muscles, and bring the blood's acidity back to normal. This period of elevated oxygen use after activity is sometimes called the oxygen debt, or more precisely, excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. The length and intensity of the recovery phase depend on how far the body went into oxygen debt. After a brief, intense sprint, recovery may take only a few minutes. After prolonged high-intensity exercise, the elevated breathing and heart rate can last much longer, reflecting the body's continued work to restore homeostasis. Interestingly, trained athletes can tolerate higher levels of oxygen debt than untrained individuals. Their muscles are better able to use and store oxygen. Their cardiovascular systems can deliver it more efficiently, and they can clear lactate more quickly. This means they can sustain higher intensities before needing to rely heavily on anaerobic metabolism. Nonetheless, even in the most trained bodies, there is a point where oxygen demand exceeds supply, and the same fundamental shift occurs. The transition into anaerobic metabolism is not a failure of the respiratory or circulatory systems, but rather a built-in adaptation. It allows survival and function in situations where oxygen delivery cannot keep pace with energy needs. In nature, this capability might mean the difference between escaping danger and being caught. In modern life, it enables feats of strength and speed that would not be possible if the body relied solely on oxygen-based energy production. Still, this shift has limits. The buildup of lactate and acidity means that high-intensity effort cannot be sustained for long. Eventually, either the activity must slow to a pace the aerobic system can support, or fatigue will force the muscles to stop. Once intensity decreases, oxygen delivery can once again meet demand. Carbon dioxide removal returns to balance, and the body begins the process of recovery. In the next part, we will look at the final phase of this journey, how the body transitions back to its resting state, how breathing and circulation gradually return to baseline, and how the lungs and heart quietly resume their gentle, steady work. 20. As the intensity of activity begins to fade, the body slowly shifts from the heightened state of exertion back toward the calm, steady rhythm of rest. This transition is not immediate. Even though the muscles have stopped working as hard, the respiratory and circulatory systems remain active, continuing their elevated pace for a time to clear the changes brought about by movement. This gentle unwinding allows the body to restore its internal balance without sudden drops in oxygen delivery or abrupt shifts in blood chemistry. The first priority in this phase is to repay the oxygen debt accumulated during exertion. Even in activities that stayed within aerobic limits, there is often a small shortfall to make up. Oxygen is now used to replenish the stores of molecules like creatine phosphate in the muscles, which provide quick bursts of energy during movement. It also helps convert any lactate produced during anaerobic metabolism back into glucose or into other usable forms of energy. This process, known as lactate clearance, reduces the acidity in the blood and tissues, easing the return to normal conditions. Breathing remains deeper and somewhat faster during these first moments of recovery. The alveoli continue to receive a high flow of fresh air, maintaining strong gradients for gas exchange. Oxygen continues to diffuse efficiently into the blood, while carbon dioxide produced both by ongoing cellular activity and by the buffering of residual acidity is exhaled at an increased rate. The respiratory centers in the brain gradually reduce their signals to the breathing muscles as carbon dioxide levels fall back toward their resting values. The heart, too, stays active during this phase. Elevated heart rate and stroke volume ensure that oxygen-rich blood circulates quickly to the tissues that need it most for recovery. Muscles receive a steady flow to aid in the removal of metabolic byproducts and to support the restoration of normal cellular conditions. Over several minutes, as demand decreases, the heart's rhythm gradually slows, and the volume of blood pumped per beat returns to its baseline level. Blood vessels also adjust during this transition. During activity, vessels in the working muscles are wide open to increase blood flow, while vessels in less active areas are narrowed. As activity ceases, these vessels return to their normal state, redistributing blood evenly throughout the body. This change occurs gradually, preventing sudden drops in blood pressure that could cause lightheadedness or dizziness. The sensation of cooling down during this phase reflects more than just a decrease in muscle activity. As blood flow patterns normalize, heat generated during exertion is carried away from the muscles and released through the skin, aided by the evaporation of sweat. This thermoregulation is an important part of the return to rest, as temperature balance influences the rate of chemical reactions throughout the body. At the level of the tissues, oxygen delivery now exceeds immediate demand, allowing cells to rebuild their energy reserves. Mitochondria continue to produce ATP, but at a slower, steady rate, storing energy for future needs. Enzymes that were active in breaking down fuel during exercise shift their focus to repair and recovery, supported by the oxygen-rich environment restored by calm breathing and steady circulation. For the lungs, this phase marks a return to their gentler role. The tidal volume, the amount of air moved in and out with each breath, decreases, as does the breathing rate. The alveoli continue their work without pause, but the intensity is lower, matching the body's reduced metabolic needs. The respiratory membrane remains as thin and ready for exchange as during exercise, but the flow of gases now matches the quiet rhythm of rest. Mentally, this period can feel like a settling. The heightened alertness of activity fades, replaced by a calmer state. The nervous system shifts from the dominance of the sympathetic branch, which supports action and movement, toward the parasympathetic branch, which promotes rest, digestion, and recovery. This shift is mirrored in the body's rhythms: slower breathing, a steadier heartbeat, and a sense of physical ease. The return to rest is as essential as the exertion itself. It allows the systems of the body to maintain their resilience, to be ready for the next demand, whether it comes minutes or hours later. Without this phase, recovery would be incomplete, and the efficiency of future activity could be diminished. By moving gradually from activity into stillness, the body safeguards its balance, protecting the delicate partnership between the lungs and the heart that sustains life in both movement and quiet. And so, the cycle completes itself. From rest to activity, from activity back to rest, the respiratory and circulatory systems adjust together, meeting the body's needs at every moment. The oxygen that enters with each breath, the carbon dioxide that leaves with each exhalation. These are the quiet exchanges that mark the passing of time inside the body, a rhythm that continues unbroken from the first breath of life to the last.